In OO, your personal story is the key that unlocks not only your speech's emotional core, but also its authenticity, originality, and why the topic matters. The personal story is a moment in your life that revealed a deeper emotional truth about your identity, your emotions, your belief that have stuck with you. This story will help you develop your OO mindset and will ultimately serve as the climax of your speech. It's the most authentic and personal moment that moves your audience emotionally to understand why your argument matters. It's the "this isn't abstract, it happened to me" moment. So, in this video, let's look at all the qualities that make for a great personal story and then go over the process that I recommend for actually developing this. Fundamentally, this is the starting point for your original oratory. One of the biggest mistakes I see OOers make is they start with the mindset and they don't think about the personal connection until far too late. And at that point, they might not actually have that emotional core, that authentic connection to their topic. And so they have a very low ceiling on their overall ability to move audiences emotionally. So let's hop on in over here and start taking a look at all these criteria for what makes a great personal story. Fundamentally, you're looking for a story that's going to change that, or a story that changed the way you saw yourself, others, or the world. It's going to be a moment that reveals a deeper emotional truth that's going to connect to a larger mindset. And this is going to make the topic real for the audience. It's going to serve as the motivating force behind your topic and help to make the topic not feel theoretical or academic, but really authentic. And you're going to show that your experience of what will be the problematic mindset ended up affecting you. So let's look at these qualities. Let's start off with specific and vivid, and you'll want to take detailed notes on each of these. So specific and vivid means that you need to tell us not a broad generalization, but a very specific story that is concrete and vivid to help us feel it. So you need to use detail. So a personal story isn't "my dad faced racism once." When? What was the situation? What was the context? What happened? Notice how Angad in his 2025 national champion speech made it much more concrete. He said, "At the beach, a stranger called my dad Osama bin Laden. That night he didn't fight back. He went home and prayed." Notice it's specific, it's vivid, it's concrete, it's a story. A piece of advice I often give students is to set the scene. Literally, who are the characters? What happened? What could we see? What could I feel? What could I hear? Describe the senses in a very concrete and vivid way. Paint that picture, set the scene, show the character in the scene, usually yourself or a loved one, going through a scene, and that will help us. Next, it needs to be something that's emotionally honest and impactful. I think a misconception a lot of people starting off with the event have is if I don't have some horrific trauma that has happened in my life, I can't do original oratory, and that's not necessarily true. There's lots of examples, if you go look at the national finalists, of people who bring in subtle moments that ended up being very emotionally honest and impactful into their speeches. That said, it has to be real. It can't be something like, playing soccer in second grade that ended up not really having much stakes on your overall life. Like when you weren't picked when you weren't picked first at soccer lunch to be on somebody's team. That's probably just not going to have the types of stakes needed to really move an audience emotionally. But I'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment. I want to go give you a bird's eye view, and then we'll describe all of the specifics in just a moment. And then it also has to be tied to a larger mindset. And so you got to make sure that the story isn't just a memory. You got to make sure it's evidence that connects to something broader than yourself. Sometimes I see students spend a long time developing a personal story that was really impactful to them, but it's so specific that it doesn't really connect to a broader mindset. And so I really see an iterative loop that occurs between you reflecting on what types of stories personally reveal a deeper emotional truth about your life, and then seeing whether or not you can connect it to a larger mindset that feels relevant to our world today. And sometimes you start with that personal story, but you realize the connection to the mindset feels really forced, and then you kind of take a stab at developing the mindset, but realize it doesn't really connect to a personal story, and you sort of go back and forth between these two facets. But I did want to start with the personal story because I do think that's the most important thing. And so the question you got to be asking here is, what does this story, this thing I experienced, reveal about the way people think or how people think more broadly? And so let's just talk about this a little bit. The key point I try to impart on students is by revealing a deeper emotional truth, it's not necessarily the story itself that matters. Sometimes I see students rush to trying to just find the most dramatic story from their life, like somebody passing away. And while you definitely would have felt strong emotions of somebody passing away, if it doesn't have a strong reflection moment of how it connects to the way that people think in a problematic way that reveals a deeper emotional truth that will move the audience to want to care about thinking about things differently, it won't necessarily be that important. So you want to avoid stories with low stakes where nothing lasting really changed, or it doesn't show a belief, identity, or emotion that is stuck with you, or maybe it feels too forced. So like here's some examples off the top of my head. If you were to say something like, in second grade, I forgot my lines in the school play and felt embarrassed, I'm sure that felt impactful for you, but does that really reveal a larger mindset? Did that really have stakes where something lasting changed? Probably not. Or, one time I dropped my tray in the cafeteria and people laughed. Those stories might be true, but are they meaningful? Probably not. The stakes just feel too low. Nothing lasting really changed. It didn't really show a belief, identity, or emotion that stuck with them. So, what does work when we talk about revealing a deeper emotional truth is you need to ask yourself, what did this moment teach you or show you about the world that stuck with you? That's the question you got to be asking. So, something like, I forgot my lines in a play could maybe become meaningful if it sparked a lifelong fear of failure and you can connect it to a story about that fear of failure that emerged later in your life. That then moves us emotionally. Or maybe I dropped my tray and got laughed at matters if it led to years of avoiding attention and ties into a speech about shame or humiliation. So I think this is the key mantra: is the story isn't the point, the reflection is. Right? The moment matters because of what it reveals. So you got to be able to explain, how did I feel about this moment? How do I see it differently now? What mindset or belief does it connect to? And I think this is a quick test, is you got to ask yourself, did this moment shape the way I think or act? Does it reveal something about a bigger issue or mindset? And would a stranger fundamentally understand why the story matters to me? If you can answer yes to all three, then you're probably on the right track. So let's look at these steps that I think are the right steps to go about developing your personal mindset. Is first, you got to start to brainstorm stories that matter to you, right? So start to think about, what is a moment you'll never forget? Why do you still think about it? And then a one-sentence summary. So I've developed an example here. Imagine a student writing a story like this, where on the first day of second grade, when my story changed my name from Muhammad to Mo without asking. In and of itself, right? Like if you were to just give me that story, I might be like, is this impactful? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But let's go to the why I still think about it. It says, it was the first time I felt like a part of me wasn't welcome in school. I didn't argue, I just accepted it. So I'm like, okay, this is getting more reflective. Notice the importance of that reflection piece here. Then it says, let's have a one-sentence summary. On the first day of school, my teacher shortened my name without asking, and I quietly let her because I thought fitting in mattered more than being me. So you can see this is now, we are already forefronting or previewing what will be this third stage of zooming out and connecting to the mindset. But this is what I would do. I would brainstorm stories that matter. And I wouldn't just do one. I would try to get a bunch at first and then kind of figure out which ones you are feeling most drawn to. Then you want to make sure that you're describing the moment like a scene, right? So look at this. I remember sitting crisscross on the classroom rug, clutching my backpack straps like a seatbelt. Muhammad, the teacher called out. I raised my hand halfway. She squinted. Mo, she said, like she was doing me a favor. The class laughed. I nodded. I hated how easy it was to say yes. So, okay, you're probably not going to write it exactly like this in the speech. This feels a little bit too much like we're writing a novel as opposed to writing a speech. But notice that we are now getting to very concrete, vivid details, and we're definitely going to incorporate some of those into our speech. And that's going to just help you to make sure that you're grounding this in a specific scene. Again, one of the biggest mistakes I see students make at this stage is they just give a very generalized story. Like, all throughout my life, I've experienced XYZ sort of problem, and I've never done anything about it. And that's just way too broad. Or you say, if I can't imagine the vivid concrete details, it's just not going to work. And then you want to zoom out and start thinking about, what mindset does this reveal? And so you can imagine, like, take a look here, right? Belief assumption. To belong in America, we have to make ourselves smaller. Where does this show up? It could show up in immigrants shortening their names or hiding their accents, or people being told their culture is too much for work or school. And then you could kind of broaden this out to a mindset that my story shows how we often believe assimilation equals acceptance, but that mindset erases identity and creates shame. And so then you can really succinctly summarize that to a potential speech thesis, which is when we believe assimilation is the price of acceptance, we don't just fit in, we fade out. So notice that that's a lot there, and it's not going to be that easy, right? I just kind of laid out an example that I think would work here, but this loop of going from personal story to larger mindset is oftentimes something that is quite tough and quite challenging. But hopefully this overview video gave you a good sense of what you need to be thinking about in developing your personal story and how you're going to use that as a starting point to really getting to a mindset.